as just a top-down approach. Are we good to start?
Yes, sorry, I just forgot to hit the record button. All good to go.
Okay, great. So I guess I'll get started. I'm gonna share a presentation with everybody. So, hi guys, I'm gonna be talking, of course, about mosquito control in Hyattsville, but also specifically about how University Park, our neighbor town just next door, was able to significantly reduce the mosquitoes in their town through a citizen science approach to mosquito control. So I'll be talking about the paper that was written about it, which is Neighbors Help Neighbors Control Urban Mosquitoes. And it talks about how everyday people works with scientists to control the tiger mosquito. So as I said, my name's Annie. I did my capstone project working on the tiger mosquito's egg-laying habits, and now I'm helping to launch the new mosquito control program. And the pictures are just some of my experience doing field work. So some background about the project in University Park. A resident of University Park with a background in biology knew some people at Rutgers, and he was very concerned about the number of mosquitoes around and found that the spraying approach wasn't really working. Just spraying adulticide at the mosquito adults wasn't really working. And he contacted his friends at Rutgers to run an experimental mosquito control program using gat traps. But not only were the traps being tested, it was also testing whether a community initiative like this would work and people would actually implement it. So it was a collaboration between scientists, volunteers, and residents. If you look in the affiliations of the paper, which I have right here on the right, you can see that some people were Rutgers scientists, but there was also a high school student volunteer that did manage to get published in this paper because this research is not inaccessible to everyday people. We actually need everyday people to participate in this type of science. So the mosquito situation in University Park is very similar to the mosquito situation in Hyattsville. So I'll use some examples of that from the paper. It's about 90% the tiger mosquito, Aedes albopictus, which is the top picture of the mosquito. You can tell that it's Aedes albopictus or the tiger mosquito because it has those stripes on the legs, as well as a dot on the a white dot on their forehead and a stripe going down their head. And you can see in the table that there really weren't that many other species. There were some native species and there were some other invasive species, but really it was mostly the tiger mosquito that was causing the biggest problem. So as I said, the tiger mosquito is an invasive species, and it is the most common in University Park, College Park, and Hyattsville. And that's because it is very well suited for living near people and living in bodies of water and areas that are not consistently wet. So when a mosquito lays its eggs, it's looking to lay them in bodies of water. And the tiger mosquito only needs a teaspoon of water or about a bottle cap full of water to lay their eggs. So they can lay their eggs in lots of hidden places that we might not think about. Originally, they laid their eggs in tree holes, but now we provide a whole lot of habitats for them, like flower pots, gutters, buckets, tarps, anything that can hold a teaspoon of water for about a week. And the tiger mosquito carries a lot of diseases that many people are concerned about, such as Zika, chikungunya, and dog heartworm. And although these diseases are not currently being transmitted, well, dog heartworm is, but not Zika and chikungunya, the reason for that is because the Maryland Department of Agriculture and the counties individually monitor mosquitoes to keep them under control. So to begin the experiment of controlling mosquitoes, controlling the tiger mosquito, the scientists advised that the best results would be achieved if the community organized together and all set out traps all at once. So the traps that they used are called ova traps. That means ova meaning egg. that means that they are trying to get mosquitoes to lay eggs in them. Because if you just kill all the adult mosquitoes, you still have all those eggs out there waiting for the next rain, and then they'll hatch and you'll have a whole other mosquito problem again. So you want to use ovitraps and you want to put them out all at once. And they wanted to do this because it's relatively inexpensive compared to other types of spraying and trapping. It's relatively simple. You can get people to do it just by putting traps out in their backyard. You don't need anything invasive. You don't need people going onto people's land or spraying chemicals. And it's also effective in Maryland's climate because we have a definitive mosquito season that kind of starts in late April, early May, depending on how warm it gets, how quickly. And this mass trapping was known to be pretty successful. They just wanted to see if they could do it with gat traps in University Park and if people would mobilize and do it. So volunteer residents organized trapping and organized their neighbors, meaning that they were going to hold each other accountable and keep up with the neighbors on how this was going. And scientists set up monitoring stations and statistical analysis. So on the next slide, we have the experimental setup, and I can go into this more in detail. If you're interested, that's just a map of University Park, but it shows how they split up each block and how they distributed traps and monitoring stations around, if you're interested in that data. But to summarize it, the city was split up into blocks and one person volunteered as the block captain, and that block captain made sure that everyone was maintaining their traps. Residents were encouraged to purchase 2 gat traps, one for the front yard and one for the backyard. And luckily, because it was still in an experimental phase at the time, they did manage to get a discount on it, which did help incentivize people. Unfortunately, that same discount is not available, but the functionality of the trap is still there. The gat traps were deployed in June, which is right before the peak of mosquito season, because even though it starts in April or May, you get the most mosquitoes in August or September, especially in this area where it stays warm and humid late into the fall. You do get the most tiger mosquitoes around August and September. So the traps needed to be deployed before that in order to be effective. And scientists collected mosquitoes 8 times over the 6 weeks of the experiment to see whether the number of mosquitoes they caught would go down and if they were still tiger mosquitoes, so if the species changed at all. The gat trap specifically, this is a type of ovitrap, and it's made by Biogents. Mosquitoes fly in through the top where that black funnel is, and they can't fly back out, especially because they're attracted to light, and that clear top allows light to go through, so the mosquitoes get confused and can't fly back out. But before they try to fly back out, they'll often try to fly down into the bottom of the trap where there's water and a few pieces of grass so that there's food for potential baby mosquitoes, which attracts the mosquito in. It lays its eggs, it can't fly back out, and it gets stuck on sticky cards that are in the trap. Then there is a BTI mosquito dunk placed in the bottom of it, and that prevents any mosquito eggs that are laid there from actually developing into mosquitoes. So you're stopping multiple generations of mosquitoes at once. So this trap design could have been very effective. It ends up being effective, but at this point they don't quite know. But they suspect that trapping and focusing on these 2 different generations of mosquitoes rather than just one would be more effective. So did it work? According to the neighborhood, about 43% of people said that they noticed fewer mosquitoes. So it's not the overwhelming majority. 26% of people didn't notice a difference and 30% of people were unsure. So at first it might seem like there is some conflict in the data. However, only 9% of people maintain the traps according to instructions. So this data does need to be taken with just a grain of salt because people are self-reporting, and if they haven't taken care of the traps, then it wouldn't be super duper effective. On the other hand, it does show that people don't necessarily follow all the trap instructions, and because with gat traps, you really do need them to be maintained, otherwise they might become a source of mosquitoes. that could alter the results. However, if you go all the way down to question number 3, do you expect to put your traps out next year? Everyone did. So despite the sort of mixed results in how people felt about the mosquitoes, everyone still thought it was a good idea to put the traps out next year. And we still haven't looked at the data that the scientists have collected, where they statistically analyzed whether or not it would be effective. And that's a lot of data there, so I will summarize. Yes, according to the data, yes. There was a significant difference between the number of mosquitoes that had gat trap, or the number of mosquitoes on blocks that had gat traps and blocks that did not. So to go over the first one really quick, you can see that between high coverage, which means 80% of people had gat traps, and low coverage, which is less than 80% of people had gat traps, in A, in the top left, you can see that there's a pretty significant difference between those two groups. And that kind of indicates that 80% of people having it out protected the remaining 20% around them on the block, and the mean level or the average level of mosquitoes was lower. They did see some results at around the 50% mark, but really most effective if people had more than 80% coverage. The reason for that is because the tiger mosquito actually doesn't fly very far. It only flies maybe 500 feet from where it was born. So if everyone can cover the area that it can fly with gat traps, it will most likely lay its eggs in the gat trap rather than finding another location. Whereas if there's not enough people using the gat traps, then there isn't enough coverage and the mosquitoes can find those teaspoon amount of water locations where they can lay their eggs someplace secret where you just can't find it to treat it. So to summarize some key points, blocks with high gat trap coverage had significantly fewer mosquitoes. As the percentage of yards with gat trap goes up, mosquito abundance goes down. The most effective control occurs when at least 80% of yards have gat traps or some type of gravid trap. And even though the traps weren't perfectly maintained, they still did reduce mosquito numbers. So perfection isn't necessary, just general maintenance and follow-up. So as for what we can do in Hyattsville, one thing that we can do is we have posted a mosquito control page, which you guys have probably already found. It has mosquito information in English and in Spanish. It has a guide on how to use gat traps because there are several pieces that you put together, and how to make a DIY ovitrap. I'm going to give an example of this with this ovitrap right here. It is made of a black solo cup, or a solo cup that I have painted black, and another solo cup with just some tape and window screening. It's plastic window screening, it's not the metal kind. And the reason that these DIY ovitraps are important is because if gat traps are inaccessible to you, a DIY ovitrap will be important. It won't be equally as effective, but it will be more effective than no trapping at all, and definitely more effective than citronella candles, than mosquito traps, than things like that. That goes on to the second point, which is use gat traps or other ovitraps. So there's a lot of mosquito information on the market, and a lot of people want to sell you things to get rid of mosquitoes. The issue is that not all of it has had adequate research behind it. Gat traps are one thing that does have significant research behind it, and so we can endorse that use scientifically. Ovitraps, the general design of having a mosquito come in, lay their eggs, and preventing those eggs from hatching or preventing those mosquitoes from leaving, are also known to be effective. So if you put water in the bottom of this cup, simple cup with holes drilled in the side of it, and with mosquito netting over it, a couple blades of grass as food, as a bait and a lure, and then you place this on top, you have now effectively screened in any mosquitoes that might hatch and escape. So something as simple as this really can reduce the number of mosquitoes. It just does need to be maintained on a weekly basis. One more thing is that we want to dump, dunk, and screen water sources. We want to dump out and clean any containers once a week. Cleaning them out physically removes the eggs from the side of the container. So dumping it out removes the water. But remember that tiger mosquitoes can actually survive for that week without the water. So that you do need to wipe out the sides of the container. Adding a BTI mosquito dunk or any other BTI formulation to permanent standing water is also really important. So BTI is a bacteria that produces a toxin, and that toxin is really specific to mosquitoes and only a few other species, and doesn't really hurt mammals or even many other insects. So putting that in the water is a good way to prevent mosquitoes without massively impacting the environment around you. And screening pipes or old gutters is another really important step to take to prevent mosquitoes from hatching, because drain pipes and gutters are a really easy hidden place for mosquitoes to lay their eggs. They're hard to get to and they're hard to clean out, but they do hold that teaspoon of water. And so if you can screen over them so that the mosquitoes can no longer fly out once they hatch, it will trap them and prevent the next generation from being born. And that last one has a typo, but talk to your neighbors about it. Engaging your neighbors or your communities in mosquito control is a really effective method of mosquito control, because, as I said, the tiger mosquito doesn't fly very far. So if you clean out your entire yard and your neighbors don't, you're still likely to experience mosquitoes flying over from their yard that were born there. And now that doesn't mean that we need to police our neighbors or anything like that, but if we can help each other out in cleaning yards, in distributing educational information, and just from checking in on whether people are thinking about mosquito control, that can be another really important way to engage with people to improve the community experience of mosquitoes overall. So some take-home messages. A successful program involves community education, mass trapping, and cooperation between neighbors. So you guys have come out here to educate yourselves, to learn, and that's wonderful. And if you can share any of that with the people around you, then it is a lot more likely that we will see a real reduction in mosquitoes this year, because the more people do it all at once, the better chance we have of actually reducing the total mosquito population. Reduction of mosquitoes occurs when there's at least 50% of residents using traps, but there's best results when 80% has them. So as I said, cooperation is a really important aspect of this. We can plan yard cleanups, traps, and we can plan to communicate more efficiently as part of our mosquito control program. And we can also have community-led initiatives to have like a spring cleanup to take away any standing water that might be sitting around. And there's more information about what you can do at the Hyattsville City website, and there's a lot more resources there. So thank you. I have some more analysis on the data if you would like it, but other than that, I'm open to questions and explanations of anything that is needed.
All right, thanks very much, Annie. I am going to go ahead and open up the Q&A. Give me just a second. I'll enable. Alrighty, so if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and use the raise hand feature on your display, or drop it in the chat. Oh,
yes, so I see. Will these slides be posted on the city website? Yes, I anticipate, right?
Yes, so as well as having this all uploaded, and all of the individual components and information and slides will be uploaded, this Zoom webinar is also being recorded. So you should be able to access everything on the website.
Yep, And as for a link to buy the gat trap, there is a link in this presentation. If you want to look it up now, it is the Biogens BG gat trap, and I can write it in the chat so that everyone can see it. This is the trap. It is about $80 for 2 of them at this point. And they recommend that you put one in your front yard, one in your backyard, and you want to put it in a shady location because mosquitoes know that if they lay their eggs in containers that are clear, that the sun is going to kill all their eggs. So putting it in a shady and moist location is the way to get it to work the best. Okay, are there any other questions? So yes, the city is looking to try to get a discount with Biogens to make it more affordable. That's also the effort with a make your own ova trap, because we do know that it is at a pretty high price point for people right now. Unfortunately, the original study, people were able to get it at a really significant discount, and that's why it worked so well. And we're not able to get it because we have the connections at Biogens that Rutgers does. But I think Colin can say what your status is on trying to get a discount.
Yes, so I've personally been in a discussion with the local distributors for the gat traps. We're still finalizing a few things, but we'll also post all of that information and all relevant updates through the same page. So you shouldn't have to look for that info at a different place. We'll make sure it's all available for ease of access for everybody.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we could get some mosquito information out there.
And I will also say, I meant to say this actually at the beginning. Annie might have elucidated this earlier, but we are also going to be doing a outreach this Friday at 4 o'clock. It's mostly geared towards kids, but it will involve teaching about how to make some of those homemade gat traps that she was showing off just a second ago. And that will also include take-home sheets that have the actual steps and process of how to make it, supplies and whatnot. So if anyone is interested and has kids that they think might be interested in doing something like that and have the availability, please feel free to come and check it out. It'll be down at the rec center at Driscoll Park.
Cool. Just one final thing. Does anyone have questions about mosquitoes in general? So where they live, how they lay their eggs, what they're attracted to, what they're not, anything like that. Okay, great. I'm glad that everyone has that information.
Alrighty, well, if no one else has any other questions, I'll just say thank you all for coming out. Thank you to Annie for this presentation. We'll be posting regular updates on new information and developments, especially with the gat traps and making sure we get the discount in on the city website. And we'll also advertise on social media and through other print publications as things progress. But thank you guys again so much for coming out, and I hope you all have a great rest of the evening.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
All right. Take care.